So let's start. We are going to look at conflicts in public health management. So often in our workplaces, we'll experience some conflicts, or you could actually be a party in a conflict. You find yourself basically in the mix-up of things. So in this session, we need to know what conflicts are, why do they arise, and how do we really manage these conflicts. So we are going to look at basically the first two objectives, and then tomorrow we shall look at the techniques of negotiation and factors that affect negotiation. So basically today we are going to only focus on the first two objectives. So conflicts arise between two parties, okay? You cannot have a conflict when you have only one individual, okay? Often the conflicts that we have in our workplaces are interpersonal. So that's why we say when we have parties that differ in interests, perceptions, goals, values, and approaches to how a particular problem can be handled. Okay. On this particular point, it doesn't mean that you cannot have what you can term as intrapersonal conflict. Okay. You can have conflicts within you as a person, conflicts within an individual. Those are intrapersonal. But in the context of this presentation, we're basically looking at the conflicts that occur amongst parties. Okay, so public health organizations will have people clashing with one another or having conflicts with one another. You can have different departments not agreeing, or you can have even organizations disagreeing on how to handle certain issues. Okay, so usually the gist of the matter with conflicts is that at least one party will have to see to it that the situation actually prevents it from achieving its performance objectives or its objectives. So that's why we actually have conflicts. If people are comfortable with one another and everyone is comfortable going on with their own work, then you will not have conflicts. But the moment you have one party perceiving or actually believing that, you see, the other party is against me in achieving my own objectives, then you have conflicts. So in the public health settings, you have conflicts arising from a number of reasons. But obviously, the causes of conflicts, even in other types of organizations, would be basically almost the same. One of the issues is that we always work with scarce resources. So most of the resources, or most of the conflicts can arise from the fact that we have scarce resources. So issues to do with which department is going to receive what amount of funding, how many employees are going to be allocated to this project compared to the other, you will have conflicts arising from there. Okay, so the allocation of resources, the fact that resources are always in limited supply, these are things that will bring conflicts. The other thing is about performance expectations, unrealistic or conflicting performance expectations. This is where you expect that a particular employee should be performing at a higher level, yet for them, they actually think that they actually are performing at their peak. So that is the mismatch in expectation between the supervisor and the subordinate. So it will create a kind of tension and dissatisfaction. And then when you have people receiving higher money than you, then this can be a source of conflict. Okay, discrepancies in salaries and benefits can foster resentment and hinder teamwork. It is going to be very hard to have, let us say, nurses earning half what the doctors are earning, yet they have the same level of qualification. So that brings about conflict. So if you find out that the nurses may not be working optimally because of that discrepancy. Okay, so the situation can be different if actually they are being paid the same amount of money. Okay, and then unclear reporting structures. Okay, this has to be solved by the other principle of Fayol, if you remember that principle. What principle of Fayol is concerned with making sure that we have proper reporting structures in an organization? Who can tell me that?
Yes,
Yes.
chain of communication.
Chain of communication or chain of command, to be very
Mm.
exact.
Or unit of command.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That line should be very clear. If you have it, then you will not have problems with the communication issues that result into conflicts within an organization. So ineffective communication, lack of transparency, poor communication channels can exacerbate misunderstandings and distrust. So within an organization, of course, you have formal channels of communication. At the moment you turn into informal channels, which include the informal chatting over lunch, over breakfast, yes, you can pass messages through that, but that is not the appropriate. It's like you want to communicate in a way that you don't want to leave any trail. Okay, you don't want the communication to be well documented. Okay, so when you don't use the proper communication channels, for you, you may look at it in a way that, okay, you don't want to be on the record. Okay, it's always very important to be on the record. When you're not on the record, you create a room for denying, that deniability. Okay, so that creates a distrust. Okay, if your boss, for example, tells you to do something very sensitive, and then that communication is not made to you in writing, when you implement that, and then when issues arise, the boss has higher degrees of denying, okay, denying that I actually told you that. Okay, so sometimes if you are the subordinate, if the task that you're being told is a little bit more sensitive, then you can politely request that the communication is made in written via the email or whatever it is. It can be through a report or a memo, whatever it is, as long as it is a formal uh, channel of communication. So that is very, very, very important. Then we have rigid structures within the organization. Okay, and of course, different people have different ways in which they manage organizations. You have people who are very fluid with the rules. Depending on the context, they can really find ways to make sure that processes are quicker. And then we have those who are really hell bent on the rules, the bureaucratic organizations where you really need to follow the procedures. So these rigid structures create frustration and the efficiency. And people at the end of the day, they get resentment. Okay. So, for example, if you want to follow up your overtime payment, okay, and then they tell you you need to get signatures from about 4 levels, okay, and this finding these signatures from 4 different personnel who may not be available at the time may create frustration. So you may think actually the finance person is denying you your money, your overtime money, but yet it is about the processes that are very rigid. Okay, so rigid structures or processes create resentment and fuel conflicts. And then lack of opportunities for employee input, involvement in decision making, and recognition of contribution. This can result into disengagement and conflict. Everyone needs to be recognized in the efforts that they put in to make sure that the organization can fulfill its objectives. The moment someone doesn't feel like their work is being appreciated, they tend to withdraw and then really don't participate that much. Okay, so they are disengaged. And this is fertile ground for conflicts in an organization. And then we have personal differences. People have different personalities. There are people who are extremely aggressive. They don't have a sense of humor. They can be overly very serious. And these kind of personalities are very difficult to work with. They always use their communication style of commanding. Okay, yet you really need to balance the communication styles. Okay, being assertive and being commanding. So all the time the person is using a commanding language, that could be something very dangerous because it can create resentment and also a very fertile ground for conflicts to arise. So it is very easy to create what we call a toxic work environment. So you have friction and tension in an organization. And then you have unequal distribution of power and perceived favoritism. Okay, when you think that there is no justice being performed, you remember justice is one of the Fayol's principles of management. People should be treated fairly. That is the equity as one of the principles of Fayol. If there are people who are treated or who are handled in a way that portrays to the others that they have an upper hand in whatsoever way, then these other people may start to resent this person, and this hinders teamwork and collaboration. And then we have emotions, frustrations, anger, anxiety that often can cloud one's judgment and lead to impulsive actions. So often, sometimes the conflicts at work arise from people who also might be having domestic issues. So they come with their own frustration from home or hunger from home and then transfer it to the workplace. And then they don't look at things objectively. Okay, so their actions are very impulsive. Okay, they can easily react out of actually nothing. And then if you have mistrust, suspicion amongst members of the particular team, that can also result into conflicts. In an organization, as a manager, you should be able to know, or you should be able to sense the signs of conflicts. When someone easily gets emotional, they raise their voice, they become aggressive, they use dismissive language, they are hostile, they have resentment, then these people could be having a conflict that is actually boiling. Okay, and then you have people who portray issues of stonewalling, which is basically that someone decides not to communicate. They enter the office, they decide to keep quiet. They are only focused on their business without communicating to anyone. Okay, so that is stonewalling. So it's an indication of a conflict. And then you have avoiding interruptions. Now, people who are social are now becoming they are not interactive as they used to be. So you really need to sense that that is a sign of conflict. Okay, and then people who resort to indirect communication is also another sign. And then performance, they decline in performance. They can no longer submit their reports on time. The reports are having a lot of errors, and all of a sudden, you have conflicts amongst the staff that's claiming that this is not my responsibility, it is his responsibility. The moment you start to have arguments like that, when they never used to exist, then you have issues there. And then tension, or what you can call strained work relations or lack of trust. People that used to communicate are no longer communicating. People that used to go out together no longer. They used to move together, they are no longer moving together. One passes the other, and this one does not pass closer. So those are signs of conflicts. So you should be able to know when they happen. So in this presentation, we are going to look at majorly 5 approaches how to deal with conflicts that arise: avoiding, competing, accommodating, compromising, and collaborating. So remember that when conflicts arise, they can impede the organization. This is to say that the organization may not achieve its goals. So you have that at stake. But sometimes also conflicts are very important to foster innovation. Okay, conflicts are not 100% very bad. Conflicts also have their own positive side, and one of those is that you want to have some element of conflict such that people really have that energy that pushes them to do things and achieve greater goals. Okay, so with these different approaches in conflict resolution, just know that you are going to have to trade off between maintaining relationships between the warring parties or the conflicting parties, or making sure that actually the organization wins out of this conflict. So let's start with avoiding. With avoiding, you have people withdrawing from the conflict and saying, okay, do whatever you want. But when someone says that, it means that they are not putting the organization as the #1 priority. So the commitment to organizational goals becomes low. So for them, their interest is to maintain the relationship. Okay, it's fine. Just do whatever you want. Okay, so they withdraw. Okay, they tend to use emotions, postponement, denial, blaming, and things like that. Basically, they are not confronting the problem and addressing it right away. Okay, the challenge with that is that you leave the conflict unsolved. Okay, the dispute is unsolved. So, of course, it will stress you, and you might have to spread that stress to others. Get this frustration. Can you use that? It may not be the best way to handle conflict, but if you find yourself in a situation where you have a tight schedule to really deal with that conflict head on, then it's better for you to leave it for that time. Okay, so avoidance can work in situations where you have very competing commitments. Okay, the challenge is if you continuously avoid this for a long period of time, of course, the impact will be on the organization. Okay, so you really need to confront this issue and solve it once and for all. So avoiding can work in certain situations, but not all the time. And then competing. Okay, this is where the person is really focused on making sure that the goal, the organizational goal has to be achieved. It doesn't matter how you're going to look at me. I think the best approach to this situation is that you take this direction and you openly talk about it, and now everyone knows that that is your direction. That's where you want to take. Okay. So with this, you basically exemplify that, okay, this is the direction that I'm following, and I'm actually tackling the issue head on. And you may use different techniques. You can either demonstrate that that you really want the direction of the organization to be this, and that is your commitment, and that is because you have the powers to take that direction. Okay, so with that, you're exercising authority basically. Okay, or you basically lay out your differing views or interests, but in a way you also want to persuade the other party to be able to really understand what you are interested in. Or you can use pressure techniques. Okay, so with this, often, of course, with this kind of approach, you may have individuals having just one moment. You get an name, then you go and pick. There are two items. Huh? Yes, I'm back. So with this, you basically you're interested in making sure that you want people to know your stand, and you are basically pushing for it. And often you will have factions emerging. Okay, factions emerging. For example, we have a number of factions, IO, former detainees, IG, you get it? This is because it's basically a competing approach to solve the conflict. Okay, so with this, the potential the potential consequences include the escalation of conflicts. There is reduced quality in agreements, and it is also very likely that you have conflicts in future. Okay, so we move to the next slide, and then the other one now here is what we call accommodating. Okay, with the accommodating approach, you basically want to maintain the relationship that you have, and there is a low commitment to organizational goals. Okay, so with this, you downplay the conflict, and basically you lay back. You say, okay, fine, as you wish, it's okay. Okay, as you wish, let us do it the way you think. With this, you're basically promoting your relationship. However, the good side is also that you have great chance to solve the problem in future. Okay, so you can do this in a situation where perhaps someone is having a difficult task at hand, and then you help them. So you accommodate the fact that they cannot really manage the task, and then you come in. But it becomes a problem if you all the time actually come in to help.
Oh, tambare get a check for you. Kurade?
Hey, who's speaking there? And then we move to compromising. Okay, where you have to balance between goals and relationships. Okay, so you basically can't take it all. You have concessions to make. Who can tell us? Who can tell us what concessions are? What are concessions?
Hello?
Yes, concession, yes.
Yes. Yes. When we talk of concession, is like the two parties, one like giving up or agreeing for the sake of objective or the goal of the organization in order for the work to go on smoothly, though there are conflicts. In
Yes.
that way, it might be resolved. Yeah.
Oh, yes, exactly. Yes. So you find a middle ground, okay? You find a middle ground such that there is no party that feels like they have lost the conflict. I mean, the battle, okay? And then collaborating, which is basically working together to make sure that you maximize the use of resources, okay? As a manager, you can use counseling also as one of the skills where I really confront the person and say, the way you are handling these issues, A, B, C, D, is not in alignment with what the organization's aspirations. So perhaps you might need to adjust. So counseling is also one of the other techniques. And then lastly is mediation, where you can introduce a third party to help in resolving the conflict. Okay, so that marks the end of this presentation.